How many times in your correctional officer career have you had to get an inmate off the telephone and they refused? In this case study, number 4, which did go before the Professional Compliance Board here in Florida, an officer had to deal with an inmate who would not follow orders to get off the phone. I'm going to give you the scenario that happened, the way the sergeant saw it when he reviewed the video, the way the officer says it happened, and then the inmate, the way he says it happened. Hey, this goes on a lot, folks, and any one of us could get into this situation. I mean, in my career, I've had to get inmates off the phone, just like all of you have, and it can sometimes turn pretty nasty. What do you think about this? I'm going to give you the full scenario. Let me know if you think it was fair, what he got. And I will tell you early on, instead of at the end, he did get terminated originally, and then the sentence was reduced, and I'll tell you what it was reduced to. I call it a sentence as discipline. Please forgive me for using the word sentence. He was not criminally charged. He was just disciplined by the agency. Here we go. Excessive use of force, case number 43642. The respondent, which is the officer, was terminated from the Miami-Dade Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, as they call themselves, subsequent to an internal investigation which sustained the charge of excessive force. Okay, now here's what happened. An inmate was speaking over the phone in a loud, abusive voice. Watch for key words here, folks. When the officer, they use respondent, I'm going to say officer. When the officer told him to quiet down, well, as it goes many times, the inmate refused, and the respondent, the officer, approached the inmate and struck him in the head. Now, folks, that's the allegation, and that's what the Professional Compliance and Ethics Committee has written down in the books now. This is permanent record, okay, for this officer. The inmate stood up, and the respondent struck the inmate in the head several more times. Officers responded to the area and separated the two. The inmate sustained swelling in the affected area, and the officer later complained that the inmate spit on him and stated he wanted to go to the hospital. I'll stop right there for a second. You know, I've been spit on, and it got in my eyes. I don't blame the officer for wanting to go to the hospital. Why? Because you want to get a blood test, and then if the inmate won't submit to a blood test, then we need to get a court order for a blood test, because we as officers want to know, does this inmate have any diseases? And luckily for me, my blood test and the inmate's blood test came out good. The inmate got a year and a day in that case. But anyway, that's why, if anybody's wondering, why would the officer want to go to the hospital for being spit in the face? Hey, you want to protect yourself, right? And your family at home. I had to throw that in there. Now we'll get back to the case. Now the sergeant reviewed the video and noted there appeared to be no need for force. So now you've got your sergeant saying there's no need for force in this case, and said the officer struck the inmate numerous times, which caused swelling to the side of the inmate's head. The sergeant noted that no efforts were made by the officer to temper the force, meaning the sergeant is saying that the officer allowed his temper to get away from him, and he acted on impulse. And that is his review of the video, that it was excessive force. And he did not concur with the force utilized by the officer. In a sworn interview, the officer said he accidentally tapped the inmate in the facial area, said he apologized to the inmate and told the inmate he was going to place him in a holding cell. He said the inmate stated he was not going anywhere and spit or spat on him. Now, apparently they're saying that they didn't see that in the video, but you know what? It's very hard to see spit flying in the air, right, folks? I mean, I'm not taking either side here. I'm just relaying to you an incident that really happened, and for you to think about when you have to deal with getting these inmates off the phone. Now, at the end, we'll talk about other ways to handle getting them off the phone without getting into an altercation with the inmate. The respondent said he later the officer reported to the hospital and received a tetanus shot. The respondent denied using excessive force, the officer, on the inmate, and said the inmate was provoking a use of force incident by using, and then the inmate by spitting on him. Now, the inmate says the officer provoked the use of force and denied failing to follow the officer's orders, which we know that was coming, right? They're also saying that the officer failed to accurately document the incident. Well, where that comes from, there's a video, the sergeant doesn't agree with what the officer did. The officer put his version on paper, so now they're saying he didn't accurately document the incident. How many of you have had the opportunity to be called in, which is fine, I think. Officer, review the video, and here's your incident report. You decide to keep your incident report the same, or we'll let you write it again. I don't see anything wrong with that. We're giving an officer a chance. Sometimes we are in use of forces that we can't remember everything. We're I hate to say in the heat of the moment, but that's what it is. You know, your adrenaline's flowing, your mind's going fast. That's another question I'm asking you. Should we give the officers an opportunity to review the video and have another chance to write their incident report? Okay. The inmate said that he was on the telephone with his girlfriend telling her what was happening and that he was tired of waiting when she asked if there were any supervisors present. He said he responded with a negative statement, and the officer got up in his face and started beating him. And he was medically evaluated, as he should be, and it was determined he had swelling to the right of his head, and he complained he had a headache. No criminal charges were filed. Now, here's what the agency said. The agency wanted to give him a 30-day suspension with no back pay and no benefits during that period of time. The Professional Compliance Committee, Ethics Committee, did not agree with that. The commission rejected the request for those 30 days and imposed a 180-day suspension, 2 years probation to begin at the end of the 180-day suspension period. Now, that suspension period has no pay, remember, 180 days. Provide them with proof of successful completion of anger management class for the officer. Now, we have another case on the same officer. Nope, that's a different case. I'm sorry. So that is the end of that. He ended up with a 180-day prospective suspension, 2-year probation, and anger management course. Now, let me know what you think about the punishment. You know, he was terminated, but he ended up getting this instead. So he did keep his job. He'll have to go through that probationary period and lose some money. Do you think that's sufficient? Do you think he should have got anything? You folks tell me. I'm throwing this out there as a case study so we can learn from it. Acting on impulse and letting our temper get away is something we all need to watch. We can learn from these unfortunate incidents. We don't want to see them, but they happen, and we can use them for learning experiences. Remember the FBI shootings in Miami when they were on the street, and it was a terrible shootout, and agents killed, and that was used for training across the world by agents everywhere. You know, we have to use these things for training, folks. What could have been done, if it's possible where he works, shut off the phones, shut off the phones for all inmates, or shut off that phone only if you have that capability. Now you've got the phone shut off. The inmate's going to have nobody on the other end. He's eventually going to have to hang up. He might have a little fit. But if he starts to have a fit, I'm going to need an additional officer if you can spare one. Got an unruly inmate in my dorm. Wait till that officer gets there, and then two of you go in. You know, I have a good friend who got injured, good officer, former military man, big, strong guy. He's about 6'2", strong. Went up to an inmate and told him to get off the phone. He would not get off the phone, and the inmate took a pencil that was in his hand, and before the officer knew it, put that pencil in the officer's neck. The officer is still working, recovered from the injury. The inmate was criminally charged, got more time added to his life sentence, already had a life sentence, placed in confinement, did everything we possibly could to the inmate for disciplinary and criminal charges, you know. But he's a lifer, and he's going to be in there for life anyway. This guy didn't give a darn what he did. But thank God the officer's still alive and well and working today. I recently retired. He's coming up behind me. Hopefully he will be done and get retirement here pretty soon. But, you know, the phone, folks, inmates on the phone, that is like dangerous. That's a dangerous area that we don't talk about enough. So I thought this case study was a good one to bring out this example today. Folks, please be careful when dealing with these inmates on the phone. Try to use other options than going up to them and telling them, get off the phone. They may try to shut the phones off, call for backup, wait a bit, discipline the inmate later, have help, pick him up, put him in the holding cell. You know, in the jails we had the holding cells right outside of the dorms, and if an inmate was unruly, we could go deal with him, get him out, put him in that temporary holding cell. We had 2, and then later they can be moved to disciplinary confinement if we have to do that. But, you know, use the tools that we have, the radio, shutting off the phone, calling for backup. Use these things to prevent this from happening. Stay safe, folks. Please be careful, and thank you for your service. Please subscribe to True Prison Stories, Gary York.